Hi, I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. With us today, a brand new guest coming to us from Switzerland, Matterhorn Asset Management. He knows all about gold and storage of gold, buying, selling. He's a former banker, finance director, top corporate executive. He's got more than 4 decades in the business. It's Egon von Greyerz. He is coming to us from Switzerland. Egon, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be on your program, Greg.
Well, I got to start with one of your most recent comments, and you said that we will soon return to what happened in 2008. Would you describe, how you come up with we're soon going to return to the calamity of 2008?
Well, what happened in 2008 was expected by us for quite a long time, Greg, the solution by throwing about $25 trillion to save banks and financial markets was not a solution. It was just a temporary deferral of the problem. The money, as we know, went into the banking system. It didn't go into the real economy. The banks in Europe still have the same problems. They are leveraged as much as before, Deutsche Bank 50 times. The US banks slightly less leveraged, but they have the derivatives, which are not included, of course, in their leverage or in their balance sheet, which, if you include that, they are actually more leveraged than the European banks. So you have the banks are lending more than ever. Corporate borrowings are up, emerging markets are borrowing more, and we have now a situation where virtually every major economy in the world is in a total mess. Japan, in my view, is going to disappear, or the Japanese economy is going to disappear into the Pacific. China is having its problems. Europe, these problems that started, Europe, actually, the EU will never work and was not supposed to work. The euro is an artificial currency that in the long run will not survive in this present form, at least. I've always argued that, although we know that US stock markets are at an all-time high, that has nothing to do with the real economy, which is an absolute mess. So the world has never been in a situation when all major nations simultaneously are having problems that are insoluble. So the world threw a lot of money at it in 2008. Now, on top of the nations having problems, or banks having problems, and also all the nations, every major nation is running a deficit today. The US hasn't had a surplus for over 50 years. Japan is totally bankrupt. So right now, I think we're going to revisit 2008, but this time, now there is no solution. Interest rates are down at zero. They've thrown as much capital at it as they ever could. And as we know, printed money can never solve a problem. Printed money can never create wealth. So that's why, in my view, we're now coming to a point where the currencies are going to start reflecting what is happening in the world. And of course, your excellent interview with our friends our friend of Shadow Statistics. He also talked about the dollar. The problem is not just the dollar. The dollar is the first one that's going to fall. I agree with that. But all the currencies are in a race to the bottom. The dollar will be first, but as we've seen, and we always measure currencies against gold, all the other currencies are falling against gold, but they can't all fall at the same time. Since 1913, when the Fed was created, we have seen a fall of 97 to 99% of all currencies against gold.
Well, I want to bring up, I want to continue this, your scenario for, that we're going to revisit 2008 or worse. But, you vault gold in the mountains of Switzerland. You were telling me this in the pre-interview, and we have a secret location. We vault gold, one of the biggest vaults in Europe. And I know on your website you tell people to get, rich people to get 50% of their assets into gold. I've heard that over here in America as well. I was talking to, people that help people buy and sell gold, and they're saying their clients are getting 50% of their assets into gold, which is, a lot of people would say, oh, that's really risky. But, other people like yourself and would say not so much, given what's coming, which is my question. Are we looking at some sort of a Mad Max scenario? I mean, some sort of a complete and total global social breakdown? Because the countries are going to be broke themselves. You were talking about, Europe and America and bankrupt, Japan, and the United States has never run a surplus. Are we going to run into some sort of a Mad Max complete total meltdown where nobody will be able to ride in and save us or put it off again?
I hate to say this, Greg, and I don't want to sound like a prophet of doom and gloom, but our task as asset managers, and we are specialists in wealth preservation, our task is to analyze the risk and to take all the possible measures that are possible to protect clients' assets from the risks that we see. And the risks are bigger than ever in the world, and I think, in my view, there is a solution. I wrote an article about a year and a half, 2 years ago, called Deus Ex Machina. This is in the old Greek plays where there was no solution to a massive problem, and as the final solution, they lower God down onto the stage, and he solves the problem. Now, in my view, that is probably the only solution to this problem. And therefore, I don't believe that is a likely solution. And therefore, sadly, we are going to see a major financial, disaster, possibly collapse. The world has been living above its means for 100 years, and it's gradually got worse as central banks have printed more and more money. Now we have, you just take in the U.S. During Bernanke's reign from 2008 to 2014. He created a debt, or the debt in the U.S. increased from $8 trillion to $17 trillion. That's an increase of $9 trillion of U.S. federal debt during these 8 years. That is more that was created from the creation of the United States over 200 years ago to the time when Bernanke took over. And that's happening everywhere in the world. The world has just been living above its means, and because now that we've had a reserve currency that doesn't deserve to be a reserve currency called the dollar, and because it has suited the world to assume that currency actually has a value, and that has lasted a lot longer than I ever thought it would, because as we talked about, we advised our investors to put up to 50% into gold in 2002. When it was $300, and the dollar is going to collapse, and then all other currencies will follow, and it will then be revealed that all these debts can never be repaid. So will they be repaid with inflationary money? Well, that's not a repayment. You just have to issue more and more money. In the end, of course, there will have to be either a reset, or I fear that the world might be in such a mess that there won't even be an orderly reset, but that we will first have hyperinflation, and then eventually hyperinflation depression first, and then deflationary depression.
The leaders around the world must know what you know. You're a smart guy, but these people, they may pretend to be stupid, but they know what's going on. I think part of the spying with the U.S. in Germany, which is pretty, you're spying on your allies. But I think they're spying because they're afraid Germany's going to cut and join Russia in China and use the yuan. And I think we're really afraid of Germany just dropping the dollar or moving away from the dollar. Could there be war because of all this? We're talking about, complete, total collapse. Could the leaders of the world just say, well, let's just have a war and cover it all over? Let's see who wins.
Well, that's been the rule. Whenever an empire is collapsing, the last actions they take is to start wars everywhere, because then you can frighten the people and you can borrow more money. And that, of course, to some extent, the United States has done that. The United States is not an empire in the sense that they've actually conquered other nations, but they are a financial empire. And of course there are US bases in 120 countries, whatever. So yes, there could easily be a war, and we see that what happened in Ukraine. It's interesting. I've always talked about in my interviews and articles geopolitical risk, But here we have a situation that arose in the world in the last 6 months now that nobody talked about last year, certainly not in the media. And that in itself is a very dangerous situation. And if you listen to somebody like Paul Craig Roberts, of course, he thinks that just the Ukraine can be the start of a world war. Of course, we hope he's wrong, but I mean, Ukraine is just one situation. When you then take what's happening in Iraq and in the Middle East, and Saudi Arabia is a very unstable situation also, and of course, former ISIS now IS or IS, they have ambitions to conquer the whole of the Middle East. So, and of course, Saudi Arabia is very exposed there. So, yes, I think sadly, war is a major part of this, of the risks we have. And also, I'm not an expert on war cycles, but if you talk to people who are, they say that war cycles are starting to really peak or become extremely dangerous for the world in the coming year or so. So, yes, we could have a war, and of course it's impossible to predict, but the risks are certainly there. So the world, as you say, we are in a situation where we have financial risk, we have economic risk, we have geopolitical risk of a magnitude that has never, ever existed in world history before.
You said a few weeks ago that Mario Draghi, the head of the ECB, is going to prepare a bailout package, and shazam! He's got a bailout package, almost $1 trillion of easy money credit, and we just had this big Portugal holding company bank, and also Bulgaria, another big bank. I mean, all of a sudden the banks in Europe look. Go ahead.
Hungary, France. I mean, you have so many countries, and then of course all of Southern Europe. Every bank, in my view, in the world, virtually every bank in the world is insolvent, in my view. It's just a matter of degree. How much big banks can hide it longer than smaller banks, and big banks have unlimited access to free capital, the way that central banks act now. And small banks, especially small European banks, don't, because they have to get it from the ECB. The ECB right now hasn't been lending. They will start again. And in my view, and I've expressed that before, in my view, the tapering will stop, or even if it continues, there will be another package. QE or money printing will not stop, because the only way that central bankers know how to defer the inevitable is to just print more money. And if they don't, the system will collapse instantaneously.
Well, I want to bring this over too, because this is USA Watchdog, back to America, and most people don't have no idea that they say to me, my accounts are insured at the FDIC, and nobody's ever taken a loss in an FDIC account. I said, well, yeah, that's true, but this is huge. I mean, we have, what happens in Europe doesn't stay in Europe, like the Las Vegas slogan. What happens in Europe flows right over here to America. So my question to you is, are bail-ins coming, global bail-ins coming? They already have it in place in Europe and in Canada, and secretly I think they have it in place in the United States. Are global bail-ins coming? Are the bankers just going to end up taking depositors' money?
Absolutely. There's no question about it. I mean, the FDIC is also insolvent. I mean, they not only, once the problems start in the U.S. again, they'll have no capital to cover that. And the same with all the banks in around the world. I mean, I actually, depositors are taking a risk, and in my view now, a massive risk by holding any amount of money in the bank. And it doesn't matter if it is a so-called safe bank, because there are no safe banks. This system is totally interdependent. Every bank that gets, let's say a European safe bank gets a deposit in US dollars, where do they put it? Mainly with a U.S. bank, I have a strong view that U.S. banks, although the leverage is lower than for European banks, but because of the derivative situation, the U.S. banks are actually more dangerous, in my view, than European banks. But the whole banking system, I mean, we talk about, as I said, 50 times leverage in some banks in Europe, 10, 20 times in the U.S. In my view, 20 times means 5% bad debt and they go under. 50 times means 2% bad debt and they go under. In my view, they'll have tens of percents of bad debt, all of the banks, because people have borrowed money in the last 100 years, or especially in the last 40 years since gold was no longer backing the dollar. And there's no chance whatsoever that anyone will ever repay this money. And therefore, I don't see the banking system surviving in its present form. Now, so bail-ins will happen. Yes, in every country in the world, it will happen. Depositors will lose their money, and anyone, and it's not just keeping money in the bank, keeping any asset in the bank. Even if you have, your shares, buying stocks through the bank, you have the custodial risk, and the custodial risk, as we learned from Lehman Brothers and Emmett Global, etc., is just as big as the risk of depositing money. So I think people should be extremely careful in not holding major assets in the banking system. Of course, people will think that I'm absolutely mad saying this. What should we do with the money? Well, it is different this time. And the system is not going to be saved by another 10 trillions of dollars printed by the World Central Bank. And people will lose out, and the banks will not be saved.
Well, given that backdrop, this is why you had as you say on your website, a ultra-secure vault in the mountains in Switzerland. But, I'm not even going to ask you to give a price in gold in dollars or euros or Swiss francs. I mean, is it just going to come down to whether either you have tangible assets, land, artwork, silver, gold, either you have business that's functioning. If you either have a tangible assets or a functioning business, or you're going to be poor. Is that what you're telling me?
Well, that's what I'm saying. But of course, some people may, I have had the argument for a lot of people saying, well, that might not even be enough if we get major problems in the world and social problems and geopolitical problems. But I have a simple view that you take the measures you can take to protect yourself and protect your family, and then you live your life, because it's no use going to worry about this every day. People have survived world wars, they have survived poverty, etc. And the world is still there. So the world won't disappear, but it will look very different, in my view, for our children and grandchildren. So we take the measures that we can to protect our capital, protect our family, and then we hope that will be enough. It might not be, but certainly, there's no use, as I said, being depressed about it. I'm certainly not depressed. You have to just enjoy life and enjoy your friends and family and enjoy your business. Yes, so we have, as you said, we have vaults we have vaults in Singapore, Hong Kong, and Zurich, and then we have this very unique vault in the Swiss Alps, which is nuclear bomb proof, earthquake proof, has all these backup services, etc. It's the biggest vault in Europe for gold. But, we try then to protect our investors' funds. And in my view, the best cash to have is gold. It's not cash in the bank. And also, of course, I believe in hyperinflation, so I don't think you should hold much cash. But even if you did, you should hold it in a form where actually that there is no counterparty risk.
Cash in hand, you're saying. If you're going to have cash, have it in hand. Have it under your direct control.
Have it under your direct control. Eliminate any counterparty to whatever extent you can. And of course, banks will always be a counterparty. And also, the thing, I don't think there'll ever be that people will go around paying in gold. And that's for the simple reason that gold is going to be fabricated or manufactured by a lot of people in the world who will put a lot of other materials into the gold. And therefore, I think people will not trust, getting a payment in gold or a gold coin from somebody that they don't know. I mean, when I was in Australia last year, a news team interviewed me. They just come back from China, and they've had a covert filming of a gold factory, and they bought $500,000 worth of gold for $500, and they were perfect bars, the known bars of gold that this factory made. So, and that's why because I think there'll be a lot of fake gold if gold really goes up in price, because this will be manufactured by a lot of people around the world. And therefore people will not trust just receiving gold from anyone. Therefore, in my view, you've got to be within the system. You've got to be within the system where you buy it straight from a refiner, and you sell it back to refiner, you know you have proper gold, and then you cash in a little bit at a time. I don't see people, so therefore I think people should hold small bars, but not big bars. But I don't see people using gold to pay. But that was in the old days when you couldn't fake gold, but now that is possible. So people should be very careful where they buy the gold and where they get the gold from.
Egon von Greyerz, he is the managing partner, founding partner of Matterhorn Asset Management. You're in Switzerland. You do everything that concerns with gold: buy, sell, hold, vault it in multiple locations, including your ultra-secure vault in the Swiss Alps. Egon, thank you so much for joining us today on USA Watchdog. We hope you come back.
Great. It was a real pleasure being on your program, and I'll be very happy to come back. Thank you.